Can somebody remind me what day it is?
We all can remind you what that
Day 45.
45. There we go.
Seems like we're in the last days.
A little help from my friends. From day 45 of the legislature media availability. We're going to miss all you folks tomorrow, but, well, kind of. So, let's open it up for questions.
How do you feel the session has been for you?
Sessions are always hard, and I think this is no exception. It's been it's 45 hard days, but it's been very productive. In fact, I can't believe how productive it's been. We've done some really significant things, and if you give me a second, we'd like to talk about a few of them. So,
just before you do, the governor gave us A- minus this morning.
yeah,
On the radio.
it's not bad.
That was before he talked to me, though.
Coming from the governor, that's pretty darn good. So, balanced a $19 billion budget, and I think the bill of bills will run in a few. Well, who knows? A few hours or so.
I bet it'll be the next few hours.
Yeah.
It'll be
Before 12 o'clock.
It'll be before midnight, I know that.
We had
Last
sweating last year.
Yeah, last year it was a few minutes before midnight. Hopefully we don't go that long this year. So, other questions?
Do you feel like, I mean, one of the biggest things that you tried to accomplish you didn't, which was tax modernization. Do you feel like, is that a regret at this point?
Heavens no. And I can't remember what bill it was that Senator Fillmore talked to on the floor, and it may have been a bill regarding, I think it was the gravel pit bill. And he talked about it and said, man, this bill, I love this process. This came out early and it got a lot of really bad media attention. Maybe some of you remember it. And they worked on it through the entire session, and it comes, and finally toward the end of the session, it passes almost unanimous, but it gets changed and it gets refined. And we have done, and the House has done, a ton of work on tax reform. And we're poised to be able to help solve the problem. And when you start to refine things, and we've talked about that a lot during press availability, that this is part of the process. We're not there yet, but a lot of the work's been done. And I said once before that, we could always maybe catch a Hail Mary, but again, my new comment is overtime's the best part of the game. So we're into overtime, but we played a heck of a game, and what we've learned from this 45 days of studying tax reform will be the basis for moving ahead. So, no, there's absolutely, in my mind, and there may be others that feel, there's no regret. It's been a lot of great hard work. So, Senator Hemmert, you talk.
I just wanted to say, I think the other thing that is actually a big win is the fact that we have become more aware of the issue with the state budget. I think you all have become more aware of the issues with the state budget, and I want to believe that the average person in Utah who reads the newspaper or watches the news is more aware of the problems in the state budget. And I think that is a huge win because it's a very complicated issue. It's a very poorly understood issue. And I think one huge success of this legislative session has been a broad understanding and awareness of this problem.
Senator Kitchen?
As far as taxes go?
Yeah, the session.
I mean, this has been a huge learning experience for me, broadly speaking. I'm happy to work on tax reform over the interim, and I through this process, I've been able to see, the issues that need to be addressed so that we can have solvency long term, and not have to revisit this year after year. But we obviously need to jump on it. This, 2020, we have to get it done, and so my hope is that during interim we can establish a dialogue with the general public so that, to build on what Senator Hemmert said, that they have a deeper understanding of the reality of our situation, and, come 2020, we will have a consensus.
Senator Stevenson, you had a
I was
comment.
just going to say, but if you're going to learn the budget, this is a great year to learn it because we gave you a choice of 3.
There were more than 3, but
Well, there's 3
you
basic.
saw 3, yeah.
Is there concern, though, President, that because the goal was to get a bill passed this session and then maybe work out some of the details? I know there was delayed implementation in the legislation in the House. Is there concern, though, now that it's going to a task force, that you're gonna lose some of the momentum. People may understand the problem, but some of the urgency is kind of taken out of this, isn't it? Because now everything's on the table. Even though you've done a lot of work, you're starting over in a lot of ways, aren't you?
So for some there might be. For me, there's not. I look at it as not a, any loss of momentum, but I, again, look at it as part of that refining process. And I will remind you a couple of things you may have forgotten already since, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever we agreed on a budget. There's a lot of $300 million of, we funded every line item in the budget, but there's about $300 million of those line items that were not funded for next year, didn't receive ongoing. There'll be urgency, 300 million reasons for urgency, so I think I don't think the urgency will go away.
That's correct. The way the budget is structured, it has a built-in stimulus package. Not as far as finances go, but it has a stimulus. We've got to do something. We need to be focused and move forward and get this done.
So I think actually there'll be more urgency. I really do. But the great thing is the session does a lot of really good work because we have 45 very concentrated days. The interim, what it does, is it allows us to reach out into the community more. And you got to have both. And this period of time in the interim will give us that breath to be able to go out. And I think all of us felt like we needed more input from the community. We'd had some, but I think we wished we could have had more time for additional.
How do you think education, both higher and public ed, were treated in the session?
Senator Milner.
I actually think this was a very good year, both for public education and higher education. We were able to give them fund 4% in terms of the WPU, but in addition to that, we were able to fund a number of the other priorities that were both on the State Board of Education's list of priorities, as well as the Public Ed Higher Subcommittee on Appropriations. And I think you'll see the impact of that for public education in our state. So it's a very good year. Similarly, I think it was a very good year for higher education. If you look at what we were able to do, both in terms of not only supporting, compensation and those kinds in benefits, et cetera, we were able to put significant funds into supporting growth, to supporting kind of performance outcomes, the ability for them to be able then to determine how to best use those funds to be able to continue to drive outcomes that we all care about in higher education in terms of retention, graduation, and preparation for life and the workforce. And in addition to that, we were able to provide funding for buildings on 3 campuses. 2 of those are really fast-growing campuses that continue to, their rapid growth just means they need to have the capacity for that on their campuses. And on one campus, it was really kind of remodel effort of a 55-year-old building that needed to be updated for things like computer science and engineering, which we know provide the platform for so many jobs in the state.
There were 2 innovative things that have really never been tried before, this TSSA, and also changing how you develop and fund buildings on college campuses. What are your expectations moving forward on that?
Do you know anything about that?
Do I know anything about those? TSSA, that's the Teacher and Student Success Act. I'm very excited about this. When we hear from our constituencies, when we talk to people, here's what we hear. Give us some funds that really have local control, that can go directly to schools, and that allow the school to determine, based on the school needs, how they want to use those funds to help improve student learning in their schools. Because we know every school is different. This really provides meaningful decision making that can be done at school level and help us focus on, if you've got some funds, what are you doing, and can you try some innovative things that are going to help you improve student learning, and we'll be able to learn from school to school about what works. So I'm excited about that. Can I keep going?
Talk about buildings.
I'll talk about buildings. You know, every year up here, we have lots of discussion about building projects on campuses. And just the way we've kind of set up over the years, we set the rules up. What it meant that you're only going to get a project every so often. And therefore, you're probably going to come for a big project because you know that you have to wait in kind of your place in line, and it may be 5, 6, 7 years before you get the next project. So you've got to think very strategically about that. What this bill will, as we get that funded, what that will allow our campuses to do, I think, is to really stretch their dollars and think about, instead of just thinking about, I'm only going to get a place every 5, 6, 7 years in line, I can think about how I'm going to use those funds, perhaps to do a small remodel that will allow me to meet the capacity needs or the specialized campus needs, specialized lab needs. Maybe instead of a whole building, I can just do a wing on a building and expand the capacity of that building to do that. So I think we're going to be able to get greater value for our dollars because we're going to allow them to be able to think more about how they maximize the value of every dollar they spend.
You know, I'd like to talk about a pilot program, 2 pilot programs that are at SUU. One is the 3-year bachelor degree. We funded that. President Wyatt has an idea how he can get students through the process in 3 years. We funded some money to help help their university do that. The second one is their building. We funded planning money for them and put intent language in it that they would use a new process, some would say it's new, to use a design build and a competitive bid arrangement to try to cut the cost of the building. We're going to use that as a pilot project and see how that works. So we're very excited about those 2 things for their campus. So
Appreciate you asking about education. I think it's one of the underreported items of the session. Think of this for a second. We funded school safety. we funded school safety. How many million? 16, 20?
16 million this next year, 26 going up to 26.
Plus I think we have 10 million in one time. So when you add the one time in,
right,
it may be up to then we funded TSSA.
TSSA and a 4% WPU.
4%
WPU. Money,
plus growth.
Aids.
I don't even know what you total all those up. It's a big WPU number, and all that's ongoing money. I mean, education did very, very well. So, and I don't think anybody. Sometimes when you don't do well, you hear a lot about it. When you do well, you hear crickets, nothing. But
well, education is nice, but what about beer?
Okay,
we're going to be smart enough not to drink it, right?
Did we invite you? Senator Stevenson. Beer, let's hear about it.
What happened?
We're going to get stronger beer in our stores.
How much stronger?
A 4.0. Well, what that does is that gives you close to 90% of the labels that have currently been in the stores that are come out of the brewery at a fixed rate. They don't have to be readjusted for the Utah market. And you know, the retailers that can see stores, people are pretty comfortable with where we got to with it. So.
And that's done, right?
I hope so. Now, if it isn't done, I'm going to be.
He is.
Interesting bill.
And the governor's on board with that?
I think the governor's on. Yeah, I don't think the governor. This isn't something that. You know, I have no idea, but you know, the governor's he's pretty understanding, and he understands that we're a market now that we have a lot of people moving in here, and there are some expectation levels, and I really believe we've done a lot of changes in alcohol law in Utah. If you go back to the last 10 years, we've really come a long, long way, and I really believe alcohol law in Utah, we're more medium we are across the country, or they are across the country.
The
We're
beer
not
bill
an
was
exception.
the beer bill was a commerce bill anyway, and the governor's, he's always been a supporter of that. So.
The House didn't
Any other
necessarily
comments?
feel that way.
Yeah, so what, before we leave beer, I mean, we also have cigarettes. We raised the age to 21. And that's a big deal. So,
What's-
Are you
what's
gonna
the status
put the tax on that the House
well,
had
we'll see.
proposed?
We're not done. We haven't seen the bill yet, but I assume we may see it yet. Okay, so.
Can we go back to Medicaid expansion?
I was
It's
wondering
like
if
100
had
years ago.
anybody forgotten that? When was that? Was that years ago or?
Well, that was very quickly passed at the beginning of the session, unlike some other major legislation that took a lot longer and didn't get as far. With Medicaid expansion, though, the idea was to start the program April 1st
Yes.
at the 70-30 split for the more limited population
Yes.
and let the others go to the marketplace. What's the status of that? Is that ready to go April 1st? You still need federal waivers, as I understand it, and I understand those haven't come in yet.
They haven't. We got a report, I believe, from Senator Christensen today. He said the waivers were on track for April 1, and then we need that's the first set of waivers. But they seem to be tracking. They were Department of Health had all the forms. They're going back and forth. So they're optimistic and fairly, let's say optimistic. I don't want to say confident because nothing's confident when you're dealing with the federal government. But they're optimistic that they'll have it by April 1. And then the second waiver, we have until I think a year from June, and they're hopeful that sometime this summer. Okay.
What happens though if, because as you say, it's the federal government you're dealing with and you've had confidence and optimism before and it hasn't panned out. What if these waivers aren't in place by April 1st? Is this just delayed until they get here?
Where I know the second set of waivers, we actually, if we don't get those, we actually expand.
Right.
But
You go to full expansion.
we go.
Yeah.
And if we don't, well, I'm sure, does anybody remember, didn't we pass a bill last year that said the legislature can bring themselves back into special session? You may see one of those.
So
Okay.
you want to make this happen April 1st no matter what?
I will want to make it happen. I think we have a commitment to the voters and I think to our constituents. And I suppose we could, I don't want to predict the future, but we're anticipating it will happen. Okay. But I'm kind of glad you mentioned Medicaid because I kind of have forgotten it too. It's been so long ago.
I had to look up the old stories to see the numbers.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
You're going to tax my memory too. But so that's a big story, and I think the bottom line is Utah did Medicaid expansion. And one way, shape, or form, we've got Medicaid expansion. So that's a big deal.
President, can you speak to the changes to the process? So we now have the delayed implementation. You can't run the same initiative 2 election cycles in a row. The posting of signatures prominently online. Is there a concern of a chilling effect for initiatives going forward?
No, I do believe that I'm fairly passionate about it, and you probably sensed that in some of my comments about this process we have, this legislative process, that I believe the legislative process is a really good process, and I believe the initiative process is also. But I also believe, and I think most of us do, is that there has to be a balance, and we do believe in a republic, and I think as we get involved in some of these issues, it'd be really impossible for 3 million people to spend the time and effort that we have to be able to deal with the issues we have. And so, anyway, I believe in the legislative process, and we need to make sure the initiative process is available, but that it doesn't become the norm. I don't think they want to do. In fact, I had a sheet. I should have given you the number of bills, but we're on track to do a lot of bills, and I don't think we want the public to deal with 300 or 400 issues, and I don't think they want it either.
Yeah, but voters brought these things because they felt the legislature wasn't dealing with it. So by doing this, are you just saying we know best? to voters?
No, I don't think so. I think we're just saying, let's be careful with the process. Okay.
Senator Kitchen, do you maybe have any comments from the
thanks.
minority side of things?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. More and more people are engaged in politics, and we have a changing demographic. We're growing really fast. People are moving in from out of state. So the politics are shifting, and it's up to us as a legislature to keep up with the desires and the sentiment of the general public. And if we don't do that, then we need to have a pathway for people to address that. And I think that's what the initiative process provided for us in 2018. And I want to make sure that we protect that. I don't know if we'll see a chilling effect. You hear, people complain and people who are upset about what we've done this session, but it's to be determined. I don't think that people are going to stop paying attention. Elections do have consequences, and we have them every other year, so people can raise their voice. And so, I believe in the legislative process as well. It would not be a good system if everybody had to vote on every single thing that we needed to address in state code. And so we need to figure out a way to get representation that matches the general electorate, and I think you'll probably see that in 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, but the next ballot initiative would be Prop 4 that could potentially be looked at by the legislature, which is on redistricting.
Yeah. Well, and there was some effort worked on. I think Senator Bramble actually had some discussions with those that wrote the initiative. Better boundaries, and I think that'll probably go on during the interim, and probably we'll have some discussions next session about it. So you can look forward to that. Let's talk about clean air. That's a big deal this year. The governor wanted a lot of money. Our budget numbers didn't come in, but it did well. I'm looking at some of the items we funded. $500,000 for a campaign. We know we're the problem. It's our automobiles and our lifestyles that cause a lot of the challenges that we have with clean air. So a messaging campaign, I think, was essential. We funded $5 million, $4,990,000 for electric vehicle charging equipment. And we're seeing more and more electric vehicles. There are probably some in this room that drive them. And I think they're gaining a lot of acceptance in the marketplace. Wood burning stoves. We know that's probably the best money we can spend, is to try to convert those that have wood burning stoves as their primary source of heat, trying to convert them into some other form of heat. And we funded $5 million for that. We actually funded another $2 million for charging stations on the Capitol Hill, and then a couple of more $1 million for telemarketing, but it's teleworking, so people can work at home. And we know cars are over 50% of the problem, so that's another big effort. And then a weatherization program. So clean air, and that was $1 million. So clean air, cleaned up. So anyway.
I think another big one that I noticed and was paying close attention to is the buyback program, the older engine buyback program. That will have a huge impact in clean air.
Yeah, and I see another one that we missed on this list was converting some of the diesel engines.
Yeah.
A couple of $1 million for that I missed. So, and they say that's a high priority item because it has some of the highest effects. So, any other comments? Eric, we all love clean air.
Oh, I was getting a different subject, but just wondering if there's any comments on the 18-week abortion ban that passed last night.
Yeah, that was another big bill. I think there were actually two abortion bills. There was, you may not remember, it was a long time ago, HB 166 on Down syndrome abortions, and then the one that passed last night, the 18 weeks. We'll see what happens on it, but I think that's a very emotional issue, but it's one that I think we picked up here in Utah, and I support it, and there may be varying opinions, so I'll open it up for comments. Any other thoughts?
What about the price tag of defending the 18-week ban? The ACLU put out a news release moments after it passed saying that they plan to take it to court. The other bill that passed had a trigger in it that would have prevented the state from having to pay for a legal fight, but this one doesn't. Is it worth it?
You know, my understanding is we're not alone. There are other states that have done this, and we've led the way with a lot of different issues. We actually pushed back on the Affordable Care Act and passed legislation that eliminated the individual mandate of, with insurance companies and litigated that. That cost a few $1 million, but I think some of those things that we do, we have to decide whether the standing up and doing what we think is the right thing to do is worth the cost. And I think the legislators weighed that. They were aware of it. And I think that's a decision that was made, and I think we're aware of that. But I also believe there'll be other states that'll join us. Comments from anybody else?
I wanted to ask about affordable housing. I just talked with Senator Anderegg, and he mentioned that on the House floor, his bill was stripped of the $24 million fiscal note. He said that was a casualty of tax reform, and that hopefully that'll get sorted out in the special session. But I want to get your thoughts on that. That there was that bill that did pass for affordable housing policy, but the money just wasn't there this session for that.
Senator Stevenson, I know you'd like to fund everything.
Not really. I mean, that would be a bit of a too fun.
But
I mean, this is more or less a general comment. Sometimes I think it's best if we as a legislature learn how to walk before we run. And what that means is maybe, I think as we go through the process, we should figure out maybe how to put 10 million in, and then 20, and then 50, or whatever the program takes. But we need to figure out how to spend the money efficiently. I don't know that this is one that we could put a lot into, but there are certainly others. If we look at the immensity of that budget, and all of a sudden you could spend a lot of money that would get very little return. And you put those kind of blocks of money into projects. The first thing that has to happen is you have to go out and put people on board to help spend it. And sometimes you can get into a laundering process, a money laundering process. I'm not focused on this bill. I think this bill's, I know Senator Anderegg has worked long and hard to make this successful. But I do feel bad we didn't have so money to put into the program. But it's one of those that, and again, possibly if you don't have a lot, maybe it doesn't do anything. But I really am a firm believer we need to look at look at big things we're taking on, and start out small and then learn to get bigger, make them efficient as we grow.
He said he hoped to get some during the session, after the
Well,
special session.
that's certainly a possibility as we go through this. The first thing we're going to want to do as we get into and then figure out this tax situation is take beyond the one-time money that we have and get it back to ongoing. As soon as we exercise our stimulus package, if you will, then that's the first thing we need to do. And then after that, I don't think we would look at it in a special session. I think it's probably going to hang there until next year, and then we'll take another look at it.
Okay. Senator Kitchen, did you have thoughts on that? I know you've been really involved in affordable housing issues in Salt Lake City.
Well, I'm really bummed to see that it wasn't able to be funded. I understand the budgetary realities, but if you think about affordable housing, I talk a lot about our growing population and we have this really tight housing market. It really does come down to supply and demand at the end of the day. So we've got to figure out a way to pump more supply into the market, the housing market, keep up with their growth. At the end of the day, what's getting in the way of housing growth are local land use issues, and so I think that this this Senate bill from Anderegg that came out of one of my committees is probably the biggest. As much as I'd love to see funding, I'm more concerned about the policy at this point, and so I'm really I feel like we can walk away from this session feeling pretty good about affordable housing. There's clearly more work to be done, and you can count on me to be working on that going forward. And I think everybody here in their respective communities are going to continue to feel the affordable housing crunch, and so the political pressure will continue to build year after year. And so I feel good about the funding coming next year and hopefully in 2021 as well.
So you mean we have to come back next year?
We've got to come back next year, unfortunately.
So to be clear, the bill, Senator Anderegg's bill, still sets some policy measures and things on affordable housing.
Tons.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a really great bill.
We need to now just fund it. So,
One last question.
You know, before they go to a question, we just passed a bill that funded the public safety and firefighters tier 2 retirement. That's a big deal. And so, I mean, when you add all this up, let's take a question, then I'll maybe summarize, but go ahead. Any other questions?
How late you gonna go?
Well, we'll make it probably till at least 7 or 8. We'll see how much further than that.
Any regrets? from the
It'll go. I don't know. We'll quit when we're done, and it'll be before midnight. Okay, maybe 11:59, but that's about it. Okay. Regrets? Oh no. When you look, we got too much to look forward to in Utah. I think we're still the best managed. Our economy's doing well. You know, you look out and the sun is shining. I think I'm feeling really great about this session. So I've had some people write some things down. Wildfire prevention, and we talked about schools, everything from safety, TSSA, WPU, growth, all the higher ed, performance-based, building new measures, you know, 3-year degrees. I mean, just look at education, all of that. The beer amendments. We even did Article 5. Remember that? We've got funding of the statewide retirement. We dealt with abortions. We dealt with privacy. We've dealt with tobacco. We've dealt with Medicaid. We've dealt with even driver's license renewals. You may remember that one too.
Did that make it through?
Pardon me?
That made it through.
It did.
Okay.
From 5 to 8 years. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
You want me- HB 294, read it. It's a beautiful bill. So, clean air, tax reform. I mean, what a session. And we got more to come. We got a few hours left. Okay.
President, if I might,
Go ahead.
if spending money makes you happy, we ought to be absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's been very busy, and we've got a lot going on, but I think we've been very fiduciary with what we've done for the taxpayer.
I'm going to open it up to comments from.
I'd like to just say that this is, President Adams has led this body of the Senate with integrity and absolute statesmanship, and cohesive in his leadership team, and also with the minority party. Thank you guys for how well you interact with us, and we don't always agree, but you've never been disagreeable, and I think this session goes down as one of the very best ones I've been around in the 11 years I've been on the Hill. So thank you, President Adams, for
A great team, a great legislature, and we are a team, whether we're majority or minority. So thank you.
We all have the same duty.
And appreciate you. It's actually been, well, I won't say it's been fun, but it's been enjoyable as we've had press availability. You've been very kind, and we appreciate you covering us and getting the word out because we need your help. So thank you.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
for having this opportunity for us. We don't have that on the other side, and I think it is very valuable. It's an opportunity to really explain these issues to people. Without availability, I think it would be a lot harder for the public to understand not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. So thank you for holding this.
Look forward to next year. Okay, see
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I could show a lot more love on full stomach.